Picture a world without running water, without central heating, without any of the modern comforts we take for granted. Now, place yourself within the towering stone walls of a medieval castle. What comes to mind? For many of us, it's a scene of mud, grime, and overwhelming filth, a place where personal hygiene was practically non-existent. But what if everything you thought you knew was wrong? What if, hidden within those cold, stone corridors, there existed a world of surprising cleanliness, of steam, and even luxury? Today, we are pulling back the curtain on one of history's most persistent myths to reveal the surprisingly hygienic reality of life in a medieval castle. Forget the image of unwashed peasants and grimy knights. We are about to embark on a journey that uncovers a sophisticated culture of bathing that kept lords, ladies, and even their servants remarkably clean. This isn't just a story about getting rid of dirt. It's a tale of human ingenuity, of adapting to your environment with creativity and resourcefulness. Imagine the sensation of stepping into a wooden tub filled with warm, herb-infused water after a long day, the steam rising around you, easing tired muscles. Envision the castle's dedicated bathhouse, a space not of grim necessity, but of relaxation and even social ritual. How do they heat all that water without a modern boiler? What kind of soaps and perfumes did they use? And perhaps most intriguingly, how did this commitment to cleanliness fit into the larger tapestry of medieval life, a world we so often misunderstand as universally dirty and primitive? The answers are more fascinating and complex than you might expect. So, prepare to have your perceptions challenged. We are going to explore the ingenious systems they developed, from elaborate plumbing to heated rooms. We will discover the luxurious oils and handmade soaps that were prized possessions. We will meet the people who made it all happen and understand why bathing was considered so important for both health and status. This is a journey into the heart of the medieval world, a place of stone and fire, but also of soap, steam, and a level of sophistication that has been largely forgotten. It's a story that connects us directly to the daily lives of people who lived centuries ago, reminding us that the desire to feel clean, refreshed, and dignified is a timeless part of the human experience. So, let's leave our modern assumptions at the gate and step inside to discover the true story of how people bathed in medieval castles. To understand the reality of castle hygiene, we first have to confront the massive, centuries-old myth that has clouded our vision. The popular image of the universally filthy medieval person is so ingrained in our culture, from movies to literature, that it feels like an undeniable truth. But where did this idea even come from? A significant part of the blame lies with later historical periods, particularly the Renaissance and the Victorians, who often portrayed the Middle Ages as a backward, dark age to make their own eras seem more enlightened and civilized. They created a caricature of their ancestors to glorify themselves. Furthermore, when the bubonic plague ravaged Europe, many at the time incorrectly linked bathing with disease, believing that opening the pores with hot water could let miasma or bad air enter the body. This led to a gradual decline in public bathing in the later medieval period, and later historians mistakenly projected this fear backwards, assuming it had always been the case. The historical record, however, tells a completely different and much cleaner story. For the vast majority of the medieval era, particularly within the walls of a castle, cleanliness was not just desired. It was a mark of your status and a vital part of maintaining good health. Medical texts from the time, based on the ancient Greco-Roman theory of the four humors, prescribed bathing as a way to balance the body's fluids. A warm bath wasn't just about washing off dirt. It was a therapeutic treatment thought to open the pores, purge impurities, and restore a person's vitality. Monastic rules, which governed the daily lives of monks, often included specific instructions for regular bathing, and castle account books are filled with entries for the purchase of vast quantities of soap, perfumed oils, and even the wages paid to the servants who maintained the bathhouses and carried the water. This isn't the paper trail of a society that despised washing. It's the evidence of a culture that valued it. This commitment to cleanliness extended far beyond the private chamber and into the very social fabric of castle life. Bathing was often a communal and even luxurious activity. For a noble lord or lady, a bath was not a hurried, 5-minute affair. It was an event. Servants would haul in a large wooden tub, often placed on a cloth to protect the floor from splashes, and line it with sheets to make it more comfortable. They would heat water over the great hearth in the kitchen and carry it up, often mixing in cold water to achieve the perfect temperature. Herbs like lavender, rosemary, and rose petals would be steeped in the water, filling the room with soothing aromas. Imagine a noblewoman soaking in her tub, not in a rush, but as a form of relaxation and self-care, much like a spa day for us. For important guests, offering a bath upon arrival was a standard act of hospitality, a way to wash away the grime of travel and refresh oneself before a feast. So, the next time you picture a medieval castle, replace the image of universal grime with one of steam rising from a wooden tub, the scent of herbs in the air, and the understanding that for these people, being clean was an essential part of what it meant to be civilized. Now that we've shattered the myth of universal filth, let's address the social reality of the castle. While personal cleanliness was valued, it was far from an equal opportunity. The experience of bathing, from its frequency to its luxury, was dictated almost entirely by one's position in the rigid feudal hierarchy. For the lord and lady of the castle, bathing was a regular, almost ritualistic part of life. Historical records, including household expense accounts, show that nobles might indulge in a full bath as often as once a week, and sometimes even more frequently before major religious festivals or important social events like a tournament or a wedding. This wasn't just about hygiene, it was a display of wealth and power. The entire process required a small army of servants heating and carrying countless buckets of water, preparing the tub, and sourcing expensive soaps and perfumes. A weekly bath was a conspicuous consumption of resources, a quiet but powerful statement that said, "I can afford this." For the serving staff, soldiers, and craftspeople who formed the backbone of the castle community, the bathing reality was markedly different. They certainly did not enjoy weekly soaks in private chambers. Their access was far more sporadic, often tied to the communal resources of the castle itself. Many larger castles had a dedicated bathhouse, usually located near the kitchens to utilize the same heat sources for warming water. This bathhouse would often be made available to the staff on a rotating schedule, perhaps once every week or two. It was a functional, not a luxurious experience. Imagine a large, steamy room where multiple people might wash at once, using simpler soaps and sharing the warm water. For a servant who spent their days toiling in the kitchens or stables, this wasn't a relaxing ritual, but a necessary and likely welcome chore. Their cleanliness was maintained through more practical means as well, including washing hands, face, and feet daily at a basin, a common practice across all social classes. The disparity went far beyond just frequency. It extended into the very nature of the experience itself. For a noble, a bath was a private affair. It took place in their personal chamber, often behind a screen or curtain for modesty, with perhaps a trusted servant in attendance. They had the luxury of space, time, and solitude. In stark contrast, a common servant's bath was a public or semi-public event. Privacy was a premium they simply could not afford. They bathed in a shared space, and the concept of personal modesty was often secondary to utility. Furthermore, the quality of the amenities was worlds apart. A lord would use finely scented soaps, often imported and made with expensive oils like olive or almond, infused with rose or lavender. A servant would make do with a much simpler, rougher soap, often locally made from animal fats and ash, which cleaned effectively but lacked any perfumed elegance. This bathing hierarchy reflects the entire structure of medieval society. Your access to hot water, privacy, and luxury goods was a direct measure of your social standing. The Lord's bath was an event that reinforced his status, while the servant's wash was a task that underscored their position. Yet, it's crucial to understand that this doesn't mean the lower classes were wallowing in dirt. They were still utilizing the resources available to them, the castle's bathhouse, river water, or simple basin washing to maintain a level of personal cleanliness that was expected within their means. The castle, therefore, wasn't a place where some were clean and others were dirty. It was a microcosm where everyone was engaging in the act of bathing, but through a lens sharply focused by class and privilege. So where exactly did all this bathing happen? Castles, with their imposing stone walls and defensive priorities, were certainly not designed with the modern bathroom in mind. There was no dedicated plumbing network feeding private chambers. Instead, bathing was a mobile, adaptable event that could take place in a few key locations, each with its own unique atmosphere and set of practical challenges. The most common and prestigious location was the private bedchamber of the lord or lady. This wasn't a clinical space. It was a personal sanctuary where the act of bathing was integrated into the rhythm of daily life. Imagine the Lord's chamber, a room dominated by a large bed hung with heavy curtains for warmth. In the center of the room, servants would place a large, high-sided wooden tub, often brought in specifically for the occasion. To protect the valuable rush matting or wooden floor from water damage, they would lay down a large cloth or sheet of waxed canvas underneath the tub. This setup transformed a space for sleep and private counsel into a temporary, luxurious bathhouse. But privacy, even for the highest ranking, was a relative concept in a castle. While the bath occurred in a private room, it was rarely a solitary affair. A noble would often be attended by a trusted servant who would help with the washing, add more hot water, or even engage in conversation. To provide a modicum of modesty, a decorative wooden screen or a heavy curtain on a pole might be set up around the tub, shielding the bather from the direct view of anyone else in the chamber. This created an intimate, enclosed space within the larger room, a bubble of steam and warmth. For special occasions or simply to display immense wealth, a noble might even receive guests or conduct minor business while in the tub, a powerful flex that demonstrated they had the resources for such an extravagant use of space, time, and labor. The bedchamber bath was therefore a statement of status, transforming a functional need into a performative act of luxury. For the bustling household staff and knights, bathing was a more communal and utilitarian affair. While they might not have had private tubs, they were not left to their own devices. Many larger, well-appointed castles featured a dedicated bathhouse. This was not a permanent, tiled room as we might imagine, but rather a specific chamber, often situated logically near the kitchen complex or the bakehouse. This strategic location was a masterstroke of medieval efficiency. The kitchen fires, which were kept burning for much of the day to prepare meals for the entire household, provided a readily available source of heat. Large kettles and cauldrons of water could be kept constantly warm on the hearth, saving the enormous effort of building a new fire just for bath time. The bathhouse itself would be a functional space, perhaps with a stone floor with a drain channel to carry away wastewater. Here, multiple people could wash at once or in quick succession, using the same source of efficiently heated water. However, the most significant location for bathing, and the one that required the most effort, was simply anywhere the lord or lady desired. The bathing tub was mobile furniture. If a noble was feeling unwell, the tub could be brought to their bedside. If they wanted to bathe in the sunny private sitting room, it could be arranged. This flexibility came at a tremendous cost in human labor. The single greatest logistical challenge of castle bathing was the sheer physics of moving water. Water is incredibly heavy, and castles were often built on hilltops or had living quarters high up in towers for defensive purposes. There were no taps. Every drop of hot water had to be manually transported. This task fell to a line of servants, often the lowest-ranking scullions from the kitchen or dedicated water carriers. They would form a human chain, hauling buckets of cold water from the castle well and large pots of scalding water from the kitchen fires up narrow, winding staircases and through long, drafty corridors. The process was a marathon of coordination. A single bath could require dozens and dozens of trips to fill even a modest tub. The water would cool during its journey, necessitating a constant relay of fresh hot water to maintain a comfortable temperature for the bather. This immense effort underscores why bathing was such a clear indicator of social class. The luxury of a hot bath wasn't defined by the soap or the tub, but by the number of servants required to make it happen. A lord's relaxing soak was built on the sore muscles and tired backs of his household. This constant, laborious movement of water was the hidden engine of castle hygiene, an everyday miracle of logistics that turned a simple wooden vessel into a symbol of power and refinement. At the heart of this entire elaborate process stood the mighty bathtub itself. Far from being a standard fixture, these vessels came in a fascinating variety of forms, each telling its own story about the resources and intentions of its owner. The most common type by far was the portable wooden tub. Crafted by skilled coopers using the same techniques employed for making barrels and casks, these tubs were stave-built, meaning they were formed from vertical wooden boards bound tightly together with metal hoops. This construction made them remarkably sturdy yet relatively lightweight, a crucial feature for an object that needed to be moved, filled, and emptied regularly. They came in a range of sizes, from smaller, more personal tubs where one could sit upright, to impressively large communal models that could easily accommodate 2 or 3 people. Imagine one of these larger tubs, steam rising from the water's surface, placed in the center of a chamber for a lord and his guests to share as they conversed and relaxed, a social event as much as a hygienic one. For the ultimate expression of bathing luxury, however, we must look to the rarest of installations, the fixed stone tub. These were the medieval equivalent of a modern jacuzzi, a permanent and incredibly costly feature found only in the most opulent of castles and palaces. Carved from a single block of stone or carefully pieced together by masons, these tubs were built into a specific room, often adjoining a private chamber. They were a profound statement of wealth, as the labor and material costs were astronomical. A stone tub couldn't be moved. It was a permanent part of the castle's architecture, declaring that its owner had not only the means to install it, but also the constant supply of water and servant labor to make regular use of it a practical reality. While we have few surviving examples, records, and archaeological findings, such as those at Leeds Castle in England, point to their existence, offering a glimpse into a level of luxury that even most nobles could only dream of. Regardless of the tub's material, comfort was a paramount concern. The idea of stepping directly onto cold, hard wood or unyielding stone was as unappealing then as it is now. To solve this, a simple yet effective system was used. Linens. Before a bath was drawn, servants would line the interior of the tub with large, clean sheets of linen or soft cloth. This practice served multiple purposes. First and foremost, it provided a comfortable barrier between the bather's skin and the hard, often rough, surface of the tub. It prevented splinters from wooden tubs and made the cold stone of a fixed tub feel less severe. Secondly, the cloth acted as a filter, catching dirt, soap residue, and any herbs that had been steeping in the water. When the bath was over, the linens could be simply removed, taking the majority of the grime with them, and making the cleaning of the actual tub itself a much easier task. This thoughtful detail transformed a functional vessel into a considerably more pleasant and refined experience. The design of these tubs also reflected a sophisticated understanding of practical needs. Many of the larger wooden tubs featured a high, sloped back, allowing the bather to recline comfortably, much like in a modern bathtub. This wasn't just for relaxation. It allowed for a full immersion that was central to the medicinal theories of the time, which believed in the healing power of steeping the entire body. Some accounts and illustrations even suggest the use of a canopy or cloth draped over the top of the tub to help contain the steam and warmth, creating a personalized steam room effect. The very shape and use of the tub, therefore, was not accidental. It was a carefully considered piece of technology, evolving from a simple container for water into a tool for therapy, socializing, and displaying one's place in the world. From the humble, mobile wooden barrel to the grand, immovable stone monolith, the bathtub was far more than an object. It was the centerpiece of a complex ritual of cleanliness and comfort. But for the highest echelon of medieval society, the kings and queens themselves, the act of bathing was elevated from a routine chore or even a noble luxury into a grand spectacle, a performance of absolute power and refinement. A royal bath was not something to be hurried. It was a leisurely, almost ceremonial event that could stretch on for hours, transforming a private necessity into a public display of wealth and sophistication. The entire process began with an army of servants, each with a specific role. While a noble lord might have a few attendants, a monarch's bathing ritual required a coordinated team. The first and most laborious task was, of course, the water. Dozens of servants would form a human chain, not just from the kitchen, but sometimes from multiple fireplaces, ensuring a continuous supply of perfectly heated water. This was no mere hot water. It was often scented well before it even reached the royal chambers. Servants would steep vast quantities of precious herbs and flowers, imported rose petals, lavender, sage, and rosemary in great kettles, infusing the water with a fragrant steam that would fill the entire room. The royal tub itself was a sight to behold. While some kings had permanent stone tubs, many used immense, beautifully crafted wooden ones, sometimes lined with fine linen or even delicate cloth of gold for the occasion. to create a sense of privacy and grandeur within the often cavernous royal chamber. An elaborate canopy or pavilion of rich fabrics would be erected over the tub. This canopy served a dual purpose. It kept drafts at bay, trapping the precious warmth and steam around the bather, and it created a majestic, tent-like enclosure that emphasized the sovereign's elevated status. Inside this scented, steam-filled tent, the monarch would recline, attended by their most trusted courtiers and servants. The bathing was a slow, methodical process. Attendants used the softest linens and sponges to gently wash the royal person, often with soaps made from the finest olive oil and scented with rare perfumes like musk or ambergris, substances worth more than their weight in gold. This was far from a silent, functional affair. The royal bath was a multi-sensory experience designed to delight and impress. It was common for a monarch to be serenaded by minstrels playing softly in the background, the melodies blending with the gentle sound of lapping water. Often, the king or queen would be served refreshments, fine wines, sweetmeats, or fruit on silver trays, turning the bath into a bizarre but utterly luxurious form of dining. We have accounts, for instance, of King Louis XIV of France, who held court from his bathtub, discussing matters of state with his ministers while he soaked. While Louis was a later monarch, this practice had its roots in the medieval period, where the bath was another throne, a place where power could be exercised in a uniquely relaxed yet controlled environment. For a visiting ambassador or a favored noble, being invited to attend the king during his bath was not an imposition. It was a rare mark of high favor, an intimate glimpse into the private world of the sovereign, reinforcing the personal bonds of fealty and patronage that held the feudal world together. The conclusion of the bath was as ritualized as its beginning. As the monarch stepped out, they were not simply dried off with a towel. They were enveloped in vast, heated sheets of the finest linen, often warmed beforehand before a fire. Attendants would then anoint their skin with even more precious oils and unguents, ensuring their complexion remained soft and fragrant for hours afterward. Every aspect of this prolonged ritual, from the scented steam and the musical accompaniment to the consumption of food and the discussion of politics, was a deliberate act of theater. It communicated a simple, undeniable message. A ruler who could command such immense resources for something as basic as a bath was a ruler of unimaginable power and civilization. Their cleanliness was not just about hygiene. It was a physical manifestation of their divine right to rule, setting them apart, body and soul, from the common masses. Now that we've envisioned the grandeur of these bathing setups, let's turn to the most demanding challenge of all, the monumental effort required just to heat the water. Simply imagining the logistics can leave you in awe. A single bath for a noble could consume dozens upon dozens of gallons of water, and every single drop of it had to be procured, hauled, heated, and transported through sheer muscle power. The entire operation began at the water source, which for a castle was typically its deep, stone-lined well, a vital strategic asset often located within the inner bailey for protection. In some cases, castles collected rainwater in vast cisterns. Drawing this water was the first step in the chain, a task that fell to servants or dedicated water carriers who would lower heavy leather or wooden buckets on ropes, hand over hand, hauling up the cold, heavy water one bucket at a time. Once a sufficient supply of cold water was gathered, the real work began in the heart of the castle's activity, the kitchen. Here, the great hearth was the engine of the entire household, a massive fireplace constantly roaring to prepare meals for hundreds of people. Tucked amidst the bubbling pots of stew and rotating spits of meat were the true stars of bath time, enormous copper or iron cauldrons and kettles. These weren't small pots, they were vast vessels, sometimes suspended on heavy chains over the fire or set directly into the embers at the hearth's edge. Filling one of these cauldrons alone required multiple trips from the well. Then, the waiting game began. Heating such a massive volume of water from cold to a steaming boil over an open flame was not a quick process. It could take an hour or more, all while the kitchen staff continued their own demanding work around them. A symphony of coordinated chaos where the noble's bath was just one more item on the day's immense to-do list. The true measure of this effort, however, is revealed in the final, grueling stage, the relay. Picture a line of servants, perhaps the younger scullions or kitchen helpers, forming a human conveyor belt from the fiery kitchen to the often distant and elevated private chambers. They would carefully dip smaller, more manageable buckets in the scalding cauldron, then begin the perilous journey. This meant navigating narrow, winding staircases carved into castle walls, traversing long, drafty hallways, and avoiding obstacles, all while carrying a heavy, sloshing container of near-boiling water. A single misstep could mean a painful scald or a ruined floor. And this wasn't a one-trip affair. A large tub might require 20, 30, or even more such journeys to achieve a sufficient water level. To make matters more complex, the water would cool significantly during its trip, so a constant flow of fresh hot water was needed just to maintain a pleasant temperature for the bather. All the while, other servants would be simultaneously bringing up cold water to mix in and achieve the perfect balance. The sheer manpower dedicated to this single task is what truly framed bathing as an act of extreme privilege. The relaxing soak of a single noble was built upon the strained backs and tired legs of an entire team. The cost wasn't just in the soap or the herbs. It was in the hours of labor diverted from other crucial tasks. This logistical marathon meant that a hot bath was never a spontaneous decision. It was an event that had to be planned, scheduled, and required the mobilization of a significant portion of the household's junior staff. The next time you picture a lord luxuriating in his tub, remember the invisible chain of effort that made it possible: the drawn water, the watched pots, and the endless, careful steps up the cold stone stairs. A silent testament to the fact that in a medieval castle, warmth and cleanliness were commodities paid for in human toil. Of course, all that hot water and elaborate plumbing would be pointless without the star of the show, the soap itself. What did medieval people actually use to get clean? Forget the uniform, fragrant bars we buy today. Medieval soap was a different beast entirely, both in its form and its fundamental ingredients. At its core, soap is a simple product of chemistry, a reaction between fats and an alkali. In the castle context, the most common fat was tallow, which is rendered animal fat, often from sheep or cattle. This was a readily available byproduct of the constant butchering and cooking that sustained the household. The alkali, the component that does the actual cleaning, was typically potash, made by leaching water through the ashes from wood fires. When these two humble ingredients, kitchen grease and fireplace ashes, were combined and boiled, they underwent a process called saponification, creating a soft, gelatinous, and often quite pungent paste. The experience of using this basic castle soap was far from luxurious. This tallow-based soap was soft and malleable, often stored in clay pots or jars rather than shaped into bars. It did an effective job of cutting through grease and grime, which was vital for people working with animals, cooking over open fires, and wearing heavy woolen garments. However, it had significant drawbacks. The smell was one of them. Tallow soaps could retain a distinct, greasy, and slightly rancid odor, which was not particularly pleasant. Furthermore, they were often very harsh on the skin. The potash created a highly alkaline soap that could strip natural oils, leaving the skin feeling dry and irritated. For the general castle population, the soldiers, craftsmen, and many servants, this functional, if abrasive, soap was the standard issue. It was a workhorse, valued for its utility over any sensory pleasure. But for those with the means, the world of soap offered far more refined possibilities. And this is where regional variations tell a fascinating story of trade and taste. In the sun-drenched Mediterranean regions, a revolution in soap-making was taking place that would eventually ripple northward to the castles of the elite. Here, instead of using animal fats, soap makers turned to the abundant local resource, olive oil. When combined with a different alkali, often derived from barilla plant ashes, they created a much harder, milder, and longer-lasting soap. This was the origin of what became known as Castile soap, named for the region in Spain where it was famously produced. Castile soap was a game changer. It was gentler on the skin, lathered more effectively, and didn't carry the unpleasant odor of tallow soaps. For a noble lord or lady, using an imported cake of Castile soap was a clear mark of sophistication and wealth, a tangible connection to the sophisticated trade networks of Southern Europe. The final touch, transforming soap from a mere cleanser into a personal luxury, was scent. Just as they infused their bathwater with herbs, medieval people understood the power of fragrance. To mask the base smell of tallow or simply to enhance the experience, they would add a variety of natural ingredients to their soaps. Herbs like lavender, rosemary, sage, and thyme were common choices, crushed and blended into the soap mixture to release their essential oils. More expensive soaps might be scented with rose petals, myrtle, or even precious spices like cloves, which were imported from the East at great cost. For the absolute pinnacle of medieval perfumery, a noble might possess soaps infused with rare substances like musk, civet, or ambergris. These animal-derived fragrances were incredibly potent and persistent, a signature scent that would linger on the skin and clothing long after the bath was over, announcing one's refined status to everyone in the room. So, from the humble, utilitarian tallow paste of the servant to the hard, olive oil-based, rose-scented cake of the lady, soap was not just a cleaning agent. It was another subtle but powerful indicator of one's place in the intricate social world of the castle. But the world of medieval hygiene extended far beyond the realm of soap. For those seeking an even more natural or specialized cleansing experience, the castle's garden and kitchen provided a veritable apothecary of herbs, flowers, and humble ingredients, each chosen for its specific fragrance and perceived therapeutic power. The act of steeping these botanicals in bathwater transformed a simple wash into a holistic treatment, engaging the senses and catering to the medieval belief in the healing properties of plants. This practice wasn't merely about smelling pleasant. It was a deeply ingrained part of the medical philosophy of the time, which held that balancing the body's humors was essential for health, and that bathing in certain infusions could directly influence this internal equilibrium. Among the most cherished of these natural cleansers was lavender, a plant as popular then as it is now. Prized for its calming and soothing scent, lavender was believed to ease headaches, quiet a restless mind, and promote a peaceful sleep. A noblewoman suffering from stress or insomnia might specifically request a bath steeped with lavender to unwind after a taxing day. Similarly, rosemary was a powerhouse herb in the medieval cleaning cabinet. With its sharp, invigorating aroma, it was thought to sharpen memory, bolster mental clarity, and relieve aching muscles, a perfect choice for a knight or lord after a long day of training or travel. Then there was mint, with its refreshing and cooling sensation. Mint-infused baths were often used to soothe irritated skin and provide a feeling of revitalization, almost like an ancient form of aromatherapy. These herbs weren't just casually tossed into the water. They were often carefully tied into small linen sachets, much like a giant tea bag, which allowed their essential oils to diffuse into the warm water without leaving behind a messy tangle of leaves and stems to cling to the skin. Beyond these fragrant herbs, medieval bathers employed some surprisingly effective and gentle alternatives. One of the most fascinating was bran, the hard outer layer of cereal grains like wheat or oats that is removed during the milling process. In a castle, bran was a readily available byproduct from the bakehouse, where vast quantities of grain were ground into flour. Rather than seeing it as waste, people discovered its remarkable cosmetic benefits. Servants would place a generous amount of bran into a small bag of fine cloth, which was then swished through the bathwater or left to soak. As the bran became saturated, it released emollient oils that turned the water milky and soft. This bran water was exceptionally kind to the skin, acting as a gentle exfoliant that smoothed rough patches while simultaneously coating the skin in a protective, soothing film. It was a natural remedy for chapped, sun-weathered, or irritated skin, offering comfort to those whose work exposed them to the elements. This reliance on botanical cleansers highlights a sophisticated understanding of the natural world, even if their explanations were rooted in the humoral theory rather than modern chemistry. They observed that certain plants made them feel a certain way, and they incorporated that knowledge into their daily routines. A bath could therefore be customized for its intended effect. A calming lavender soak before bed, an invigorating rosemary wash to start the day, or a soothing bran bath to heal the skin. This practice also demonstrates a resourceful, waste-not mentality. The castle utilized nearly everything it produced, from kitchen ashes for soap to miller's bran for skincare. The bath was not just a tub of water. It was a vessel for nature's own pharmacy, a place where cleanliness, health, and sensory pleasure were seamlessly woven together through the thoughtful application of the plants growing just outside the castle walls. Beyond the simple tub bath, the medieval castle offered another, more intense path to cleanliness, a specialized room dedicated to intense heat and steam. Tucked away within the castle grounds, often near the kitchens or bathhouse, you might find a stovehouse or sweating house, a facility that functioned as the period's equivalent of a sauna or steam room. The core of this experience was a small, tightly sealed chamber, often with a sturdy, domed brick or stone oven at its heart. This wasn't an oven for baking bread. Instead, it was designed to heat large, specially chosen stones to a searing temperature. Once the stones were glowing hot, the attendants would pour water or even herbal infusions over them, creating an explosive burst of steam that would instantly flood the room with thick, moist heat. The bathers, seated on wooden benches arranged around this central heat source, would simply sit and sweat, immersed in a cleansing cloud of vapor. This practice was far more than just a way to get clean. It was a deeply held therapeutic ritual rooted in the dominant medical theory of the age, the concept of the four humors. Medieval physicians believed that health was a delicate balance of four fluids within the body: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Illness was thought to occur when these humors became unbalanced or corrupted. The intense, dry heat of a sweat bath was prescribed as a powerful way to correct these imbalances. It was believed that the heat would literally cook and purge the excess or corrupt humors from the body, driving them out through the skin in the form of sweat. This process, known as diaphoresis, was seen as a form of internal cleansing, a way to purify the blood and reset the body's natural equilibrium. For a noble suffering from melancholy, thought to be caused by an excess of black bile, a session in the stovehouse was considered a direct and potent cure. The full ritual of the sweat bath was a multi-stage process designed to maximize its therapeutic effects. After spending a significant amount of time in the sweltering heat, until they were drenched in sweat and their pores were fully open, the bather would not simply dry off and get dressed. The next crucial step was a sudden, shocking cool down. They would emerge from the steamy chamber and immediately take a cold plunge into a nearby trough of water or a cold bath, or in warmer months, simply roll in the cool grass or have buckets of cold water poured over them. This dramatic temperature shift was not for the faint of heart, but it was considered essential. The cold plunge was believed to slam the pores shut, trapping the good humors inside while sealing out any external influences of bad air or miasma that could cause illness. It also provided an incredible jolt to the system, leaving the person feeling invigorated, refreshed, and thoroughly cleansed from the inside out. Following this thermal shock, the final act of the ritual was a vigorous scrubbing. With the body softened by sweat and the pores wide open, servants or the bathers themselves would use coarse cloths or bundles of soft, smooth twigs to scrape away the now loosened grime and the layer of sweat that had carried the so-called bad humors to the surface. This physical exfoliation, combined with the internal purification of the sweat, completed the holistic cleansing process. The entire experience from the purging heat to the bracing cold and the final abrasive scrub was a powerful sensory journey. It left the participant not only physically clean, but also with a profound sense of psychological and physiological renewal, a feeling of having been thoroughly reset and rebalanced. In a world with few medical miracles, the sweat bath stood as a trusted, powerful, and deeply satisfying tool for maintaining one's health and well-being. While the lord and lady enjoyed the luxury of their scented soak, this moment of relaxation was only possible because of an entire hidden workforce operating with quiet efficiency. The true engine of castle hygiene was not the tub or the soap, but the servants whose relentless labor turned the monumental task of bathing from an impossibility into a routine event. Their roles were specialized, demanding, and absolutely essential, forming a complex chain of command that stretched from the depths of the well to the privacy of the noble chamber. Without their efforts, the entire sophisticated culture of cleanliness we've been exploring would have simply crumbled. The most physically grueling task fell to the water-bearers. These were often the youngest and strongest members of the household staff, whose entire purpose was the relentless movement of water. Their work began at the castle well, a deep, cold shaft where they would lower and haul heavy leather buckets, hand over straining hand. Once filled, the real challenge began, the ascent. Carrying these sloshing, immensely heavy buckets up narrow, spiral staircases demanded immense strength and a careful, steady footing. A single misstep on a damp, uneven stone step could mean a painful fall and lost water, wasting precious time and effort. They worked in a constant relay, a human pipeline stretching from the water source to the kitchen fires, and then, most arduously, up to the distant private chambers. The sheer volume required was staggering. A single bath could easily consume 50 or more gallons. meaning countless exhausting trips for just one person's moment of cleanliness. Theirs was a life of sore muscles, wet clothing, and the constant back-breaking weight of the castle's most vital resource. Meanwhile, in the bustling, fiery heart of the kitchen, another critical team was at work. While the chief cooks focused on the household meals, junior scullions and kitchen hands were tasked with the equally important job of heating the bathwater. This was no simple matter of turning a knob. They managed enormous copper or iron cauldrons suspended over the secondary flames of the great hearth, constantly feeding the fire with wood to maintain a roaring heat. Judging the water temperature was a skill in itself. It had to be hot enough to be effective, but not so boiling as to be dangerous to carry or use. These servants had to coordinate perfectly with the water bearers, ensuring a constant supply of cold water to fill the pots and a steady flow of heated water to be dispatched upstairs. They worked in a world of intense heat, steam, and constant activity, their faces lit by the flickering firelight as they performed the crucial, unseen alchemy of turning cold well water into the foundation of noble comfort. Once the hot water began its journey up the stairs, a third group of specialists took center stage, the chambermaids and personal attendants. For a high-ranking noblewoman, her chief chambermaid was a figure of immense trust, a confidante who managed her most intimate spaces. When it was time for a bath, this attendant's work was delicate and precise. She was responsible for the final preparations in the chamber, laying down protective cloths to shield the floor, ensuring the wooden tub was perfectly positioned, and lining it with the soft linen sheets that provided comfort and filtered the water. She would oversee the mixing of the hot and cold water in the tub, testing the temperature with her own elbow to achieve the perfect balance. Her duties then extended to the bathing ritual itself. She would be the one to add the bundled herbs or flower petals to the water, releasing their fragrance, and she would often assist in the actual washing, using the finest soaps and softest cloths to gently cleanse her mistress's skin and hair. The world of castle hygiene also relied on the expertise of the laundress. While she did not work directly in the bath chamber, her role was indispensable to the entire cycle of cleanliness. All the linens used in the bath, the tub sheets, the drying cloths, the towels ended up in her care. Laundering in a medieval castle was another Herculean task. It involved hauling water, making lye soap from ashes, and scrubbing the fabrics by hand, often at a dedicated wash house near a stream or well. She was responsible for removing the grime, soap residue, and herbal stains from the fine linens, ensuring they were fresh, white, and sweet-smelling for the next use. Without her skill, the entire bathing ritual would have quickly become an unsanitary affair, with nobles stepping out of a clean bath only to be dried with a dirty, damp cloth from the previous day. Her work ensured that the standard of cleanliness extended beyond the body to the very fabrics that touched it. These servants did not simply perform isolated tasks. They operated as a synchronized team, a well-oiled machine of hygiene. The water bearer's arrival with a fresh bucket coincided with the chambermaid's need to top up the cooling tub. The kitchen boy's signal that a new cauldron was ready prompted the next relay team to form. This required constant, unspoken communication and an intimate knowledge of the castle's layout and rhythms. Their collective effort was a massive diversion of labor, a clear indicator that a noble's bath was a significant economic event. The cost was measured not in coins, but in the thousands of steps taken, the countless buckets hauled, and the many hours of skilled and unskilled labor that could have been spent on other tasks. The steam rising from the Lord's bath was, in a very real sense, the visible proof of his command over the time and energy of others, a luxury built entirely on the silent, dedicated work of the unsung heroes of castle hygiene. So, with all this infrastructure, labor, and luxurious soaps in place, what was the ultimate driving philosophy behind this immense effort? It turns out that bathing was far more than just a matter of getting clean. It was a cornerstone of mainstream medieval medicine. The entire approach to health was governed by a framework inherited from ancient Greek and Roman physicians like Galen, which revolved around the balance of the body's four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. An excess or corruption of any one of these fluids was believed to cause sickness, and the goal of all treatment was to restore the body's natural equilibrium. This is where the concept of the six non-naturals comes into play, a fascinating medical doctrine that placed personal hygiene, including bathing, at the very center of proactive healthcare. The term non-naturals might sound strange to our modern ears. It didn't refer to something unnatural, but rather to six aspects of life that were not part of our innate, inborn constitution, yet had a profound power to influence our health. These were factors that an individual could and should actively manage to stay well. The six were the air one breathes, food and drink, sleep and wakefulness, exercise and rest, the retention and evacuation of waste, and finally, the passions of the soul or our emotions. Regulating these six areas was considered the primary way to maintain health and prevent disease. And nestled within this framework, the act of bathing was seen as a powerful tool that influenced nearly all of them. It cleansed the skin, which was thought of as a pore that needed to be kept open for the body to breathe and expel impurities. It affected the body's temperature, influenced circulation, and had a direct impact on one's emotional state, calming the passions of the soul. Within this system, a bath wasn't a one-size-fits-all affair. It was a prescribed therapy. Physicians of the time believed different types of baths produced specific effects on the humoral balance. A hot bath, for instance, was considered moist and heating. It was prescribed to open the pores, encourage sweating, and purge the body of excess phlegm, which was seen as cold and moist. This made it a common treatment for ailments thought to be caused by an overabundance of phlegm, such as rheumatism, joint stiffness, and certain types of lethargy. In contrast, a cold bath was considered contracting and cooling. It was used to slam the pores shut, to fortify the body against external influences, and to counteract conditions associated with too much yellow bile, which was hot and dry, such as fevers or inflammatory skin conditions. The temperature, duration, and even the timing of a bath were all carefully considered as part of a holistic medical regimen. This therapeutic approach extended deeply into the specific ingredients added to the water. Herbal infusions transformed a simple bath into a targeted medicinal treatment. A person suffering from skin diseases like sores, rashes, or leprosy might be prescribed a bath steeped with agrimony or marigold, herbs known for their antiseptic and wound-healing properties. For rheumatic pain or aching muscles, a bath infused with meadowsweet or chamomile was recommended for their anti-inflammatory and pain-relieving effects. Even common kitchen herbs played a role. Sage was believed to strengthen the nerves and soothe tremors, while a bath with fennel was thought to be good for the eyesight. The choice of herb was not random. It was based on centuries of observed, practical knowledge about how these plants affected the body, all filtered through the lens of humoral theory. The warm water acted as a conduit, helping to drive the therapeutic virtues of the herbs deep into the body through the open pores. delivering their healing power directly to the imbalanced humors within. We even have surviving medical manuscripts and household books from noble families that contain specific recipes for these therapeutic baths. Imagine a castle's resident physician or the lady of the manor consulting a handwritten book that instructed them to take a handful of wormwood and steep it in a bath to relieve jaundice, or to boil henbane in water to add to a bath intended to ease insomnia and pain. These were not superstitious folk remedies in the pejorative sense, but rather the standard, evidence-based medicine of the era. The act of bathing was, therefore, a deeply intentional act of self-care and healing. When a medieval lord stepped into his tub, he wasn't just washing off the grime of the day. He was participating in a respected medical practice, actively working to rebalance his body's internal chemistry, soothe his aching joints, and calm his mind, all according to the most advanced medical science of his time. While the private, therapeutic soak was a key part of castle life, bathing also had a vibrant, gregarious counterpart that was deeply woven into the social fabric. For the medieval nobility, personal connections and political alliances were the currency of power, and remarkably, the shared bath became one of the most effective venues for cultivating them. Far from the hushed solitude of a chamber, these were noisy, lively, and often lavish gatherings centered around a massive, high-sided wooden tub, large enough to comfortably accommodate several people at once. Imagine this scene: a lord hosting 2 visiting barons and a bishop in his solar, the room warmed by a crackling fire. In the center sits this great tub, filled with steaming, herb-scented water. The men recline within it, the water up to their chests, while servants stand by with jugs of warm water and pitchers of fine wine. This was not considered strange or indecent. It was a supreme gesture of trust and informality, a way to strip away the rigid protocols of the court and converse as equals. The atmosphere at these events was carefully curated to be both relaxing and stimulating. Servants would circulate with trays of delicacies, spiced wine, sweetmeats, and fresh fruit, allowing the bathers to refresh themselves without ever leaving the water. Musicians might play softly in the background, their melodies mingling with the sound of laughter and the gentle lapping of water. In this unique setting, the usual barriers of formal dress and hierarchical seating were dissolved. The shared vulnerability and intimacy of the bath created a powerful bond, fostering an environment where candid opinions could be exchanged, alliances could be whispered, and business could be conducted with a level of frankness impossible in the Great Hall. A land dispute that might have caused a shouting match across a council table could be amicably resolved amidst the steam, with a handshake sealed over the rim of a shared wine cup. This was diplomacy conducted in the most personal of spaces, where the warmth of the water mirrored the warmth of the companionship being forged. Of course, such intimate gatherings were governed by a complex and unspoken code of etiquette. The rules were not written down, but every noble understood them. Conversation was expected to be lively and engaging, but topics that might lead to heated argument, such as certain religious doctrinal disputes or particularly sensitive political grievances, were generally avoided to maintain the congenial mood. Decorum was paramount. Splashing, loud, boisterous behavior, or any action that could be seen as uncouth was strongly frowned upon. The shared space demanded mutual respect. Servants played a crucial role in maintaining this delicate balance, their presence a constant but unobtrusive reminder of the social order, even in this relaxed setting. They ensured wine cups were never empty and towels were always at hand. performing their duties with a quiet efficiency that allowed the nobles to fully immerse themselves in the social ritual without worrying about the practicalities. This social bathing culture extended powerfully into the intricate dance of courtship and romance. For a knight seeking to win the favor of a noble lady, or for two noble houses looking to strengthen a union, a shared bath could be a sanctioned space for flirtation and connection. We have accounts and artistic depictions from the period showing a man and a woman bathing together, often with a cloth or a strategically placed board between them to preserve a degree of modesty. In this context, the bath was a stage for displaying not just physical attractiveness, but also wit, charm, and sophistication. A knight could demonstrate his gentle nature and conversational skills, while a lady could showcase her grace and intelligence. The scent of rose petals in the water, the softness of the linen sheets lining the tub, and the intimate, quiet setting all combined to create an atmosphere of sanctioned romance that was both sensual and deeply respectful, a world away from the formal and often chaperoned interactions in other parts of the castle. The pinnacle of this social phenomenon was the truly lavish bathing feast, an event that blurred the lines between a hygiene ritual, a party, and a symbolic display of opulence. On special occasions, such as after a successful tournament or to celebrate an important betrothal, a lord might host an extravagant multi-course meal where the bathing tub was the centerpiece. Guests would dine on roasted fowl and spiced pies while actually sitting in the warm water, with servants delivering food and drink directly to them. These events were designed to astonish and delight, to be talked about for weeks afterwards. They were a bold declaration of the host's immense wealth, his ability to command vast resources of water, fuel, labor, and food purely for the pleasure and entertainment of his guests. In a world where power was often demonstrated through martial might, these bathing parties showcased a different, more refined kind of strength, the power to create an island of luxury, comfort, and sophisticated camaraderie within the cold, stone walls of a fortress. Yet this world of social bathing and hygienic luxury existed within a deeply religious society, raising a fascinating question. What did the Church, the ultimate moral authority of the age, think about all this washing? The relationship between medieval piety and personal cleanliness was far from simple. It was a complex, often contradictory dance between spiritual ideals and bodily realities. On one hand, the Church firmly championed the virtue of physical cleanliness, the powerful idea that cleanliness is next to godliness, though often attributed to later periods, perfectly captures a medieval sentiment. Monastic rules, which provided a blueprint for a holy life, explicitly mandated regular washing. The rule of Saint Benedict, for instance, instructed that monks were to receive fresh linens and have the opportunity to bathe regularly, viewing bodily cleanliness as a reflection of a pure and orderly soul. Dirt was associated with sin and decay, while a clean body was seen as a worthy vessel for the spirit, a temple to be maintained with respect. This endorsement, however, came with significant caveats and a deep-seated anxiety. The very same church that promoted washing also issued stern warnings against its potential for moral corruption. The core of their concern lay in two of the 7 deadly sins, vanity and lust. A bath could easily slide from a simple act of hygiene into an occasion for vanity if it became overly focused on enhancing one's physical appearance to attract admiration or outshine others. But the greater fear by far was lust. The church fathers worried that the sensuous pleasure of warm water on bare skin, the fragrance of scented oils, and the act of gazing upon one's own naked body, or even worse, the bodies of others in a communal setting could easily inflame carnal desires. This was not an abstract fear. It was a direct challenge to the ideal of chastity and the control of bodily passions. We can see this deep-seated ambivalence clearly in the writings of influential clerics. Saint Francis of Assisi, who championed a life of extreme poverty and penance, reportedly considered bathing a form of self-indulgence that weakened the spirit's resistance to worldly comforts. He famously referred to dirt as his sister, embracing physical filth as a way to mortify the flesh and conquer pride. Conversely, other religious figures took a more moderate, practical stance. Abbess Hildegard of Bingen, the renowned 12th century mystic and polymath, wrote extensively on the natural world and health. She actively prescribed herbal baths for specific ailments, viewing them as God-given remedies to be used wisely for healing. Her work reflects a belief that caring for the body, when done with the right intention, was not sinful but a responsible form of stewardship. This theological tension created a practical tightrope for the devout nobility to walk. How could one maintain the cleanliness expected of their station without falling into the sin of luxury? The solution often lay in intention and moderation. Taking a bath for reasons of health, as prescribed by a physician, was almost always acceptable. Washing to prepare for prayer or to receive the Eucharist was a sign of reverence. The problem arose when bathing was pursued purely for pleasure, for sensuous delight, or for social display. A noblewoman might justify her scented, herbal bath as a therapeutic treatment for her aching joints, thereby framing a luxurious experience as a medical necessity. A lord hosting a bathing feast for political allies could argue it was a necessary act of hospitality and diplomacy, not mere decadence. This constant internal justification reveals how medieval people navigated the conflicting demands of their faith and their daily lives, finding ways to be both clean and pious, often by carefully defining the purpose behind the bath. Moving from the body to the head, the medieval approach to hair care was a fascinating mix of practical necessity and aesthetic pride, requiring ingenuity to keep their often long locks clean and free of unwelcome guests. Washing hair was not a daily event, but when it was done, it was a thorough process. They did not have modern shampoos. Instead, they relied on herbal rinses and simple lye-based soaps. A common method involved steeping herbs like chamomile for light hair or rosemary and sage for dark hair in hot water, then using this fragrant infusion to rinse the hair after washing. These herbs were chosen not just for their pleasant scents, but for their perceived benefits. Rosemary was thought to strengthen hair and prevent graying, while chamomile was believed to bring out golden highlights in the sunlight. For the actual cleaning, a person would use the same soft, tallow-based soaps used on the body, or a more potent lye solution. Lye, made from water filtered through wood ashes, was a powerful cleanser but incredibly harsh, capable of stripping oils and leaving hair brittle if used too frequently. Managing this delicate balance between effective cleaning and avoiding damage was a constant challenge. The tools for maintaining hair between washes were just as important as the washing itself. Combs were ubiquitous personal items, crafted from wood, bone, or, for the wealthy, ivory. These were not merely for styling. They were essential implements for daily grooming and public presentation. A noble would be expected to have well-kept, neatly combed hair as a sign of their dignity and self-respect. However, the comb's most vital function was far more practical. It was the first line of defense against lice and nits. In a crowded castle environment, these pests were a persistent and unavoidable nuisance. Specialized combs with extremely fine, closely set teeth were used to meticulously scrape through sections of hair, physically dragging the lice and their eggs out. This was a time-consuming and tedious task, often performed by a servant or a family member, and it was a routine part of life for everyone, from the highest lord to the lowest servant. The fight against parasites was a universal aspect of medieval hygiene, and the humble comb was a crucial weapon in that ongoing battle. When we shift our focus from the hair to the mouth, we enter the realm of oral hygiene, an area where medieval practices were surprisingly diverse and thoughtful, driven by a clear desire for fresh breath and healthy teeth. The most basic and common method of cleaning teeth involved a simple yet abrasive tool, a rough linen cloth. A person would wrap a piece of coarse cloth around their finger, sometimes dipping it in water or a pinch of salt, and then vigorously rub their teeth and gums to scrub away food particles and plaque. For those with greater resources or access to different traditions, there were more refined options. Across Europe and the Middle East, people used chew sticks, which are twigs from aromatic trees with frayed ends. A popular type, known as a miswak, was made from the Salvadora persica tree and contained natural antiseptic compounds. A person would chew one end of the twig until the fibers separated, creating a soft, brush-like end that could be used to scrub the teeth, while the released sap provided a fresh, cleansing sensation. Beyond these mechanical cleaners, medieval people understood the importance of combating bad breath, developing a variety of homemade mouthwashes and breath fresheners. These were not for daily use by the masses, but were certainly employed by the nobility before social gatherings or meals. A common mouth rinse was a simple mixture of vinegar and water, whose acidity helped to kill some bacteria. Far more pleasant were infusions of strong-smelling herbs like mint, sage, rosemary, and cloves. These would be steeped in wine or water to create a flavorful liquid for swishing and gargling. Chewing on aromatic seeds like fennel, anise, or parsley was another widespread and effective way to mask unpleasant odors lingering on the breath. For the wealthiest in the castle, there were even more exotic solutions. Ground spices like cinnamon and cloves might be mixed with honey to form a kind of primitive paste, or a person might possess a small, perforated pomander ball filled with fragrant resins like frankincense or myrrh to hold under their nose if the smells around them became overpowering. Despite these efforts, dental health remained a significant challenge. Without modern dentistry, tooth decay and gum disease were common, often leading to pain, infection, and tooth loss. The medieval diet, which for the wealthy included a surprising amount of sugar from honey and dried fruits, contributed to these problems. When a toothache struck, the remedies were a mix of the practical and the superstitious. Herbal poultices made from henbane or belladonna might be packed around an aching tooth to numb the pain, while a prayer to Saint Apollonia, the patron saint of dentistry, was a common spiritual recourse. Ultimately, if a tooth became too decayed, the only solution was extraction, a painful procedure typically performed by a barber surgeon or even a blacksmith with the requisite strong hands and crude tools. The state of a person's teeth could therefore be a visible marker of their age, their diet, and their access to care, a silent testament to a life lived long before the advent of fluoride and dental floss. Of course, a clean body demanded clean clothes and linens to complete the cycle of castle hygiene, and this introduced one of the most physically demanding and never-ending chores in the entire household, the laundry. While the lord and lady enjoyed the fruits of this labor, wearing freshly laundered tunics and sleeping on crisp bed linens, The reality of achieving that freshness was a world away from the quiet luxury of their chambers. This was the domain of the laundress, a role almost always filled by women, whose strength and stamina were tested every single week. The entire operation was a monumental feat of logistics, chemistry, and sheer brute force, all dedicated to fighting the constant assault of grime, sweat, and grease that was part of daily medieval life. The process began with sorting and the initial soak, a step designed to loosen the most stubborn dirt. Soiled linens, clothing, and the all-important bath sheets were collected and taken to the washhouse, which was usually a separate, small building located near a reliable water source like a stream, a well, or a specially built cistern. Here, the laundry was sorted by color and fabric type, a practical necessity even then. The dirtiest items, often the kitchen rags, and the linens used to line the bathing tubs, were placed into large wooden vats or troughs and covered with a solution of lye. This lye wasn't a purchased product. It was made on site by the laundress herself, by pouring water through a barrel of wood ashes collected from the castle's countless fireplaces. This created a caustic, alkaline solution that was incredibly effective at breaking down grease and organic stains. But it was also harsh enough to damage finer fabrics and irritate the skin, which is why it was reserved for the toughest jobs and the hardiest linens. For the actual washing, the primary tool wasn't a gentle agitation cycle. It was a wooden implement known as a battling staff or wash beetle. After the initial soak, the wet, heavy linens would be removed from the trough and placed on a flat, sloping stone or a thick wooden board. The laundress would then take the battling staff, a wide, paddle-like tool, and beat the fabrics with rhythmic, powerful blows. This wasn't a light tapping. It was a vigorous, full-bodied action designed to physically pound the dirt and moisture out of the fibers. The sound of this beating would have been a familiar one around a castle on wash day, a steady, percussive thumping that echoed the immense physical effort involved. Imagine the laundress, her arms and shoulders aching, repeatedly lifting and swinging the heavy paddle, using force to accomplish what modern machines do with water pressure and spin. This was the core of the cleaning process for most items, a brutal but effective way to scrub without abrasively wearing out the cloth. Following the beating, the linens were rinsed, which was another labor-intensive task involving hauling countless buckets of clean water to remove the soapy, dirty residue. The final step was drying, a process entirely at the mercy of the weather. In sunny conditions, laundry was spread out over bushes, hung on ropes strung between posts, or draped over the castle walls to catch the breeze and the sun's bleaching power. The sight of billowing white sheets and colorful garments would have been a common one, a public display of the household's commitment to cleanliness. In the damp and cold of winter, however, the challenge was immense. Laundry would have to be dried indoors, near fireplaces, or in the relative warmth of the kitchen and great hall, often creating a humid atmosphere and taking days to fully dry. The importance of fresh linens, however, made this effort non-negotiable. For the bath ritual itself, the soft sheets that lined the tub were essential for comfort and hygiene, acting as a filter that trapped the grime from the bather's skin. After the bath, these linens were soiled and had to be washed, creating a direct and continuous loop between the luxury of the bath and the relentless work of the laundry. This connection was even more critical when it came to the bed. In an age without central heating, beds were often large, curtained structures designed to retain warmth, and they were the heart of personal comfort and privacy. Fresh bed linens were not just a luxury, they were a fundamental component of a healthy sleeping environment. Soiled sheets could harbor pests, retain bodily odors, and contribute to skin ailments. Changing the bed linens regularly was a recognized part of household management, and the chambermaids responsible for this task worked in close coordination with the laundress. The crisp, sun-dried smell of freshly laundered sheets was as valued then as it is now, a simple pleasure that signified order, care, and a refuge from the harshness of the outside world. The entire cycle, from the sweaty battling staff to the neatly made bed, underscores a holistic understanding of cleanliness. It wasn't enough to wash the body. The very fabrics that touched that body, from the bath sheet to the nightshirt to the bed linen, had to be scrupulously maintained, a never-ending battle against dirt fought with lie, muscle, and unwavering diligence. These personal grooming tools were far more than simple accessories. They were everyday essentials, cherished items that spoke to a universal desire for neatness and self-presentation. While we've explored the grand rituals of the bath, the maintenance that happened between those soaks was just as crucial, conducted with a variety of implements that were both practical and deeply personal. Archaeological excavations of castle sites, from latrines to abandoned living quarters, have yielded a treasure trove of these objects, often beautifully preserved in the oxygen-deprived mud. They paint a vivid picture of a society that, despite its reputation, was keenly interested in the meticulous care of the body from head to toe. The most common and versatile of these tools was undoubtedly the comb. In a medieval castle, you would rarely be far from one. These weren't the flimsy plastic items of today. They were sturdy, often beautifully crafted objects made from materials like bone, antler, or, for the wealthy, ivory and even boxwood. A typical design featured two distinct sides, a brilliant piece of practical engineering. One side had widely spaced, sturdy teeth, designed for the initial detangling of thick, often long hair. The other side featured extremely fine, closely set teeth, and this was the workhorse. This fine-toothed side was the primary defense against the ever-present menace of lice and nits. Grooming was a daily necessity, and this ritual of combing was as much about pest control as it was about style. For a noble, a well-groomed head of hair, meticulously combed and free of tangles, was a visible sign of refinement and self-respect, a quiet but powerful statement of their civilized status even in a rugged environment. But the medieval obsession with neatness extended well beyond the hair on one's head. The management of facial hair was another clear marker of identity and status, and for this, they turned to the razor. These were not the disposable blades of our era, but solid, durable tools, often crafted from bronze or iron. They typically featured a single, sharpened blade that would pivot or fold into a protective handle, a design that feels surprisingly familiar to users of modern straight razors. Maintaining a sharp edge was a skilled task, often requiring a barber surgeon or a trusted servant who knew how to use a whetstone effectively. The choice to be clean-shaven or to sport a beard was not merely aesthetic. It often carried social and cultural weight. A young knight might shave to appear more boyish and vigorous, while an older, established lord might grow a beard to project wisdom and authority. Trimming a beard into a specific style required patience and a steady hand, demonstrating a level of control and attention to personal detail that was highly valued. The most intimate glimpse into the medieval grooming ritual comes from the discovery of personal hygiene sets. These were often small, portable kits, sometimes carried on a belt, that contained a curated collection of tools for maintaining one's appearance throughout the day. These kits were the medieval equivalent of a modern toiletry bag, and their contents reveal a fastidious attention to detail that is often overlooked. Alongside a small comb and a folding razor, you would frequently find an ear pick or ear scoop. This was a delicate spoon-shaped tool, usually made of bone or metal, designed for the careful removal of earwax. The very existence of such a specialized tool speaks volumes about their daily routines and their understanding of bodily cleanliness. It wasn't enough to have clean hair and a neat beard. Even the ears required regular, meticulous maintenance. Completing these personal kits was another essential implement, the nail cleaner. These were typically small, sharp spikes or blades, often doubling as toothpicks, used to scrape dirt from under fingernails and toenails and to keep them neatly trimmed. In a world of manual labor, from handling reins to working in the kitchens, keeping nails clean was a constant battle. For the nobility, whose hands were often on display during meals and social gatherings, clean, well-kept nails were a subtle but important sign that they were above the most grubby forms of work. The combination of these tools, comb, razor, earpick, and nail cleaner, formed a holistic system of personal care. This wasn't vanity in the sinful sense the church warned against. It was a disciplined, daily practice of bodily maintenance, a way to present a composed and dignified self to the world, proving that castle hygiene was a continuous endeavor, always at hand. Even with the most diligent bathing routines and laundry schedules, a medieval castle was a fortress under constant olfactory siege. Imagine the sheer concentration of smells in a single, sprawling stone complex. The lingering scent of smoke from dozens of hearths, the earthy aroma of damp stone and rushes on the floor, the pungent odor of tallow candles, the faint but ever-present smell of the garderobes, and the animal musk from the stables and kennels. Layer on top of that the scent of closely packed humanity soldiers, servants, craftsmen, and nobles all living and working in close quarters. This potent melange was simply a fact of life, an unavoidable background hum to daily existence. Yet, far from simply enduring it, medieval people developed a sophisticated and proactive arsenal to combat these odors, not merely for pleasure, but grounded in a firm belief that foul smells could directly cause disease. The driving theory behind this was the concept of miasma, or bad air. Long before the discovery of germs, medical experts believed that disease was spread through corrupt, foul-smelling air that rose from rotting matter, marshes, or even crowded, unclean spaces. This miasma was thought to enter the body through the pores or through breathing, upsetting the delicate balance of the humors and causing sickness. Therefore, fighting a bad smell wasn't just about comfort. It was a vital form of preventative medicine. Purifying the air around you was as important as purifying your own body through bathing. This belief turned pleasant scents into a form of medicinal armor, a protective barrier against the invisible threats carried on the wind. A castle chamber filled with the fragrance of burning herbs wasn't just creating a pleasant atmosphere. It was, in their understanding, actively disinfecting the very air they breathed. The most widespread and effective method of scenting a room was through fumigation. This involved burning or smoldering aromatic substances to release their cleansing smoke into the air. In the great hall, before a feast, servants would often carry around a censer, a metal vessel on a chain, swinging it gently to spread the smoke. Inside, they would burn fragrant woods like juniper or cedar, whose sharp, clean scent was believed to be particularly effective at warding off plague. In private chambers, a common practice was to throw handfuls of aromatic herbs directly onto the hot coals of the hearth. Lavender, rosemary, and sage would crackle and pop, releasing bursts of their essential oils into the room, creating a soothing, sleep-inducing atmosphere in a bedroom or a fresh, invigorating one in a solar. For those who could afford them, more exotic imports like frankincense and myrrh, resins prized since biblical times, were burned during religious ceremonies and high-status gatherings, their rich, complex smoke signaling both piety and immense wealth. For personal, portable protection against foul odors, the ultimate accessory was the pomander. The name itself comes from the French pomme d'ambre, or apple of amber, referring to its original form as a ball of ambergris, a rare and valuable waxy substance produced in the intestines of sperm whales. Over time, the term came to describe the exquisite object that held such substances, a perforated metal case, often made of gold, silver, or gilt brass, designed to be carried or worn. A pomander was a piece of functional jewelry, a beautiful defense against the stench of the world. It was typically crafted in segmented sections, like the segments of an orange, that could be screwed or clicked together. Each compartment held a different aromatic substance, creating a custom blended personal fragrance that would waft out through the intricate filigree holes. Filling a pomander was a deeply personal art, a way to curate one's own scented environment. A noblewoman might choose a combination of dried rose petals, lavender, and a crumble of ambergris for a soft, floral scent. A lord preferring something more robust might fill his with cloves, cinnamon chips, and a piece of musk, a potent animal secretion that provided a deep, long-lasting bass note. Some recipes were specifically designed for medicinal purposes. A common blend included wormwood, rue, and camphor, all herbs believed to be particularly effective at repelling plague-bearing miasmas. The pomander was often worn on a long chain around the neck or fastened to a belt, ensuring that wherever its owner went through the smoky great hall, past the stables, or even in a crowded chamber, they carried with them a small, precious bubble of purified air, a fragrant declaration of their status and their understanding of health. Beyond the pomander, personal perfumes were applied directly to the body and clothing. These were not alcohol-based sprays as we know them today, but rather scented oils and unguents. After a bath, a noble would often be anointed with perfumed oils, massaged into the skin to provide lasting fragrance and moisture. These oils were created by steeping vast quantities of flower petals or herbs in a base of mild oil, such as olive or almond oil, for weeks or even months, allowing the scent to infuse slowly. A popular choice was rose oil, requiring thousands of petals to produce just a small vial, making it incredibly expensive. Spices like cinnamon, clove, and nutmeg could also be ground and infused into oils, creating warm, spicy scents that clung to wool and linen garments. A lady might tuck little sachets of dried lavender and rose petals between the folds of her gowns in her clothing chest, or a knight might have his gloves lined with scented leather. This practice ensured that even when they were not freshly bathed, their personal aroma was one of cultivated refinement, not of the castle around them. The quest for fragrance even extended to the very fabrics that furnished the castle. It was common to strew fresh herbs and flowers on the floors, especially before a large gathering. Meadowsweet, with its sweet, honey-like aroma, was a particular favorite for this purpose. As guests walked across the floor, they would crush the plants underfoot, releasing a fresh, summery scent in the air. Carpets, if a castle possessed them, might be sprinkled with dried rose petals and powdered orris root, a fragrant violet-scented rhizome. Bedding was another critical frontier in the war on odor. Mattresses stuffed with straw could quickly become musty, so they were often mixed with or layered over with sweet-smelling herbs like lavender, hops, and heather, which were believed to promote sleep and repel insects. Lying down to sleep in a medieval castle, then you wouldn't be enveloped by the scent of old straw, but by a calming herbal bouquet, a final, fragrant defense against the less pleasant realities of medieval life. All of these intricate bathing rituals, from the servant's laborious water relay to the noble's scented soak, relied entirely on one foundational element, a massive and uninterrupted supply of water. Without it, the entire culture of castle hygiene would have been impossible. The very survival of a fortress under siege depended on its water, but so too did the daily comfort and health of everyone inside. Securing this vital resource was a feat of medieval engineering that transformed the castle from a mere stronghold into a self-sufficient community, and the systems they built to manage it were far more sophisticated than we often imagine. The first and most crucial line of defense was the castle well. This was not a simple backyard hole. It was a monumental piece of architecture, often located in the most protected part of the inner bailey, sometimes even carved directly down through the bedrock the castle was built upon. These wells were incredibly deep, sometimes plunging down 100 feet or more to reach the groundwater table. Digging and lining such a shaft was a dangerous and expensive undertaking, a clear sign of a lord's wealth and long-term commitment to his stronghold. The wellhead itself was usually housed within a small, protective stone structure to keep out debris and contamination. Drawing the water was a constant, demanding task. Servants would lower heavy leather or wooden buckets on ropes, hand over hand, a process that required significant strength and endurance. For the largest castles, some were even equipped with a large treadmill, a kind of giant hamster wheel powered by a person walking inside it, which could raise a much larger bucket with less physical strain, a clever application of machinery to solve a fundamental human problem. But relying solely on groundwater was not enough for a bustling household, especially in regions where the water table was deep or the rock was hard to penetrate. This is where rainwater collection came into play, showcasing a remarkable understanding of hydraulic engineering. Castle architects designed the entire structure to function as a giant catchment system. Vast roof areas, particularly those of the Great Hall and the towering keep, were sloped to channel every drop of rainfall into a network of gutters. These weren't simple troughs. They were often made of carved stone or, in the most advanced systems, lead. The rainwater would then flow through these gutters into downpipes, which directed it into storage tanks known as cisterns. These cisterns were large, waterproof chambers, often lined with plaster or lead to prevent seepage, and they could be located underground in cellars or built into the castle walls. This collected rainwater was softer than well water and often preferred for washing hair and bathing, as it lathered more easily with soap. It was also crucial for non-drinking purposes like cleaning floors, watering kitchen gardens, and, of course, supplying the enormous quantities needed for the bathhouse and private baths, reducing the constant strain on the well. The real marvel of this system, however, was its distribution network. While not a pressurized municipal system as we know it, some castles featured surprisingly complex internal plumbing. Lead or hollowed-out wooden pipes would run from the cisterns to key locations throughout the fortress. Gravity was the engine that powered this entire network. A cistern positioned high up in a tower could feed water down to a kitchen, a washroom, or even a private chamber located on a lower floor. We have evidence from castle accounts and archaeological remains of dedicated lavatoriums, or washing rooms, often located near the chapel. These were elegant stone basins with multiple taps, fed by a lead pipe from a cistern above, where people could wash their hands before meals or prayers. In the kitchen, a constant supply of water from a pipe meant that the great cauldrons could be filled more efficiently, directly supporting the immense task of heating bathwater. This gravity-fed system was a testament to their practical understanding of physics, allowing them to move water efficiently without any mechanical pumps, bringing a degree of convenience to daily life that starkly contrasts with the primitive image we often hold. The quality of this water was a constant concern. While they had no knowledge of microscopic bacteria, medieval people were excellent practical observers. They understood that clear, cool water from a deep well or a fast-flowing spring was generally safer than stagnant pond water. They also knew that foul odors or a muddy appearance were signs of corruption. To improve the water's taste and clarity, they employed simple but effective filtration methods. Servants would sometimes strain water through coarse cloth or layers of sand and gravel to remove sediment before it was used for drinking or cooking. In the cisterns, a settling process would naturally occur, where heavier particles would sink to the bottom, leaving clearer water to be drawn from the top. The strategic placement of latrines, or garderobes, was also a critical part of water management. These were almost always built jutting out from castle walls, with their shafts emptying into a moat or a dedicated cesspit far below, carefully situated downstream and downwind from the main water sources to minimize the risk of contamination. This careful separation showcases a pragmatic, if incomplete, understanding of sanitation. Ultimately, the entire water supply system was a hierarchy in itself, mirroring the social structure of the castle. The deepest, purest well water was typically reserved for the lord's table for drinking and for cooking the household's food. The collected rainwater, while clean, was often designated for washing, bathing, and industrial tasks like the laundry or the forge. The immense volume required for a single noble's bath, therefore, represented a significant allocation of this precious resource. It was a tangible expenditure. Every barrel of water heated for the tub was water that had been laboriously drawn or carefully collected, a commodity that required forethought and infrastructure to provide. The silent, steady flow of water from well and cistern through lead pipes and into buckets was the invisible lifeblood of the castle, a complex engineering achievement that made the steam rising from a wooden bathtub not just a symbol of luxury, but a testament to human ingenuity in harnessing the most fundamental element of life and cleanliness. Fortunately for us, the medieval world left behind a rich visual and written record, and when we turn the pages of these ancient documents, we are met with compelling proof that bathing was a regular, celebrated part of life. The myth of the universally filthy Middle Ages crumbles away under the weight of this evidence, revealing a society that not only practiced personal hygiene, but also took pride in depicting it. One of the most stunning windows into this world is a genre of illuminated manuscripts known as the Tacuinum Sanitatis, or the Maintenance of Health. These were beautifully illustrated guides based on an 11th century Arabic medical handbook, and they were wildly popular among the European nobility. They were essentially medieval wellness encyclopedias, and their pages are filled with vibrant scenes of daily life, all centered on the 6 non-naturals essential for health. And right there, among the images of people eating, sleeping, and exercising, are meticulous illustrations of people bathing. Take a moment to picture one of these scenes. A full-page miniature shows a couple, richly dressed in the fashion of the era, standing beside a large, high-sided wooden tub. Steam rises gently from the water's surface. The man is already in the tub, submerged to his waist, while the woman, perhaps his wife, is testing the water temperature with her hand before joining him. Servants are bustling in the background, one carrying a tray with what appears to be a towel or a cloth, another perhaps bringing a jug of hot water. The scene is not furtive or clinical. It is serene, domestic, and utterly normal. This isn't an image of debauchery or strange ritual. It is a snapshot of a routine hygienic and social activity. In another part of the same manuscript, you might see an illustration of a bathhouse, a communal space where men and women are separately depicted washing and steaming, further cementing the idea that these were accessible public facilities. The Taquinem Sanitatis doesn't just tell us that people bathed. It shows us the relaxed, almost elegant atmosphere in which they did so, completely contradicting the grim, muddy picture we've been sold. Moving from images to words, we find equally compelling proof in the dry, meticulous language of household account books. These were the financial records kept by a castle steward, tracking every penny spent to keep the noble household running. They are the unsung heroes of historical accuracy, and they are filled with entries that read like a shopping list for cleanliness. For instance, the accounts of King Edward I of England meticulously record payments for the making of a large bathtub for the use of the Lord Edward, and for the purchase of canvas to line the said tub. This is not an isolated example. The accounts of the Countess of Leicester in the 13th century detail expenditures for vast quantities of soap, for herbs like lavender and violets to be used in the bath, and for the wages of the servants whose specific job it was to heat and carry the water. These are not the records of a rare, extraordinary event. They are the routine, administrative proof of a standard household function, as regular and expected as buying bread or candles. The sheer volume of these entries, repeated year after year, proves that bathing was a persistent, budgeted for necessity, not an occasional luxury. Beyond administrative lists, we can hear the echoes of bathing in the literature and poetry of the time. Romantic tales and epics, which were meant to reflect the ideals and practices of noble society, often used the bath as a setting for key moments. In the famous medieval romance, Tristan and Isolde, the two protagonists first fall in love after accidentally drinking a love potion, and a pivotal scene unfolds as they are bathing upon their ship. The bath here is a place of intimacy and transformative emotion. In another tale, the Roman de la Rose, an allegorical dream vision that was a medieval bestseller, the allegorical figure of idleness is described as being so clean and well kept that she has just emerged from a bath. This literary trope directly links bathing with courtly refinement and aristocratic virtue. Even in the bawdier stories of Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, references to washing and cleanliness pop up, grounding the fictional narratives in the recognizable reality of daily life. When writers of the time wanted to depict a character as civilized, noble, or desirable, they frequently showed them engaging in the act of bathing, revealing just how deeply ingrained the value of cleanliness was in the medieval psyche. Perhaps one of the most telling forms of evidence comes from the world of medicine and personal advice. We have surviving letters and instructional books written for young nobles, guiding them on how to behave properly. These texts consistently emphasize the importance of personal hygiene. A young knight might be advised to wash his hands and face every morning, to keep his hair neatly combed, and to bathe regularly to remain pleasant to be around. Medical treatises, like the one written by the renowned Magninus of Milan, go into great detail about the benefits of different types of baths, warm baths to open the pores, cold baths to fortify the body and prescribe specific herbal additions for various ailments. This wealth of prescriptive literature proves that bathing wasn't just something people did. It was something they were actively encouraged to do by doctors, parents, and moralists. The evidence from art, finance, and literature forms a powerful, interlocking chain of proof. When you see it illustrated in a gorgeous manuscript, itemized in an account book, and romanticized in a poem, the conclusion is inescapable. The medieval castle was not a place that shunned water. It was a place that actively, regularly, and sophisticatedly embraced it. While castle dwellers in Western Europe were orchestrating their complex bathing rituals with wooden tubs and servant relays, a very different and far more advanced culture of cleanliness was flourishing just beyond their horizons. To truly appreciate the European approach, we must widen our lens and look east, to the two great civilizations that were the true inheritors of Roman bathing sophistication: the Byzantine Empire and the rising Islamic world. In Constantinople, the glittering capital of Byzantium, the classical tradition of public bathing never truly died out. Imagine the scene not in a drafty stone chamber, but within the vast, echoing halls of a true Roman-style bathhouse, a thermae. These were not just functional spaces. They were monumental civic centers, built of marble and adorned with mosaics, where the mechanics of hygiene were elevated to an art form. The Byzantines maintained the complex hypocaust systems, networks of underground furnaces, and hollow walls that circulated hot air, heating the floors and rooms to precise, luxurious temperatures. A Byzantine bather would progress through a series of rooms. First the warm tepidarium to acclimate, then the hot cauldarium for a deep, sweating cleanse, often scraping their skin with a strigil, and finally a revitalizing plunge into the cold frigidarium. This was a seamless continuation of a 1,000-year-old Roman tradition, a daily ritual of social and physical wellness that made the European noble's weekly soak in a portable tub seem almost quaint by comparison. The social role of these baths in Byzantium also highlights a stark contrast. In a European castle, bathing was largely a private, class-based privilege, a display of individual wealth and status. In Constantinople, the great bathhouses remained profoundly public institutions. They were hubs of social interaction where merchants, officials, soldiers, and artisans mingled. Business deals were struck, political gossip was exchanged, and the city's diverse population connected in a shared, civilized space dedicated to communal well-being. The bathhouse was as central to civic life as the forum or the hippodrome. This was a level of integrated public hygiene and social infrastructure that had largely vanished from the fragmented kingdoms of the West. The European castle, for all its ingenuity, was an inward-looking fortress. The Byzantine bathhouse was an outward-looking symbol of a unified, urban, and enduringly Roman identity. Meanwhile, in the bustling cities of the Islamic world, from Cordoba to Baghdad and Damascus, another bathing tradition was reaching its zenith, the hammam. Inspired by the Roman and Byzantine models they encountered, Islamic architects and engineers refined the bathhouse into a uniquely Islamic institution, blending practical cleanliness with spiritual purity and profound social importance. The hammam followed a similar three-room sequence: warm, hot, and cold, but its atmosphere and purpose were distinctly its own. More than just a place to get clean, the hammam was a cornerstone of Islamic life, intimately connected to religious practice. The Islamic faith places a strong emphasis on ritual purity, or wudu, requiring cleansing before the 5 daily prayers. While wudu typically involves washing the hands, face, and feet at a fountain, the hammam provided a space for the major ritual cleansing, or ghusl, required after certain states of impurity. This spiritual function made the hammam not a luxury, but a vital community necessity, often built right next to a mosque. The experience inside a hammam was a world away from the solitary European tub. It was a sensory journey designed for thorough purification and relaxation. Upon entering the steam-filled hot room, bathers would sit for a long time, allowing the heat to open their pores and loosen impurities. Then, an attendant, known as a telak, would provide a vigorous full-body scrub using a rough cloth mitt called a keys. This wasn't a gentle wash. It was an intense exfoliation that removed layers of dead skin, leaving the body tingling and revitalized. This would be followed by a full-body soap wash and a massage, before finally culminating in a cooling rinse. The entire process was methodical, thorough, and left a person feeling cleansed in a way that a simple soak in a tub could never achieve. The architecture supported this ritual, with domed roofs featuring star-shaped openings that allowed sunlight to filter through the steam, creating a serene, almost celestial atmosphere. Perhaps the most significant difference lay in the hammam's role as an unparalleled social nexus, particularly for women. In the gender-segregated Islamic world, the hammam provided one of the few public spaces where women could gather freely, away from the male gaze. On women's days, the bathhouse transformed into a vibrant, noisy, and exclusively female social world. It was a place for new mothers to be celebrated, for marriage arrangements to be discussed, for stories to be shared, and for community bonds to be strengthened. Women would spend hours there, socializing, eating, and even receiving cosmetic treatments like henna application. For men, the hammam was equally important as a place for business and political discussion, often functioning as an informal club or meeting house. This deep integration of bathing into the very fabric of daily social and spiritual life created a culture of cleanliness that was both more advanced and more holistic than anything found in contemporary Europe. The European castle's bath was an event. The hammam was an institution. Comparing the two reveals not a story of European dirtiness, but one of different priorities where the West developed a personalized, resource-intensive model of hygiene centered on the noble household. The East perfected a communal, architecturally grand, and spiritually infused model that served the entire urban population. This golden age of castle hygiene, however, would not last forever. The very medical theories and religious attitudes that had once championed bathing began to turn against it with devastating consequences, leading to a profound cultural shift in the later medieval period. The catalyst for this dramatic reversal was one of the most terrifying events in human history, the arrival of the Black Death in the 1300s. As this invisible killer swept across Europe, wiping out as much as half the population in some regions, physicians were utterly powerless. Working with their existing medical framework, they scrambled for an explanation, and they found one in the mechanics of bathing itself. The dominant theory of the time held that disease was carried in the air as a poisonous miasma. Doctors reasoned that taking a hot bath would open the body's pores, making them wider and more vulnerable, essentially creating entry points for this corrupt, plague-ridden air to invade the body and corrupt the humors within. In their minds, the very act of washing with warm water was not protecting you. It was inviting death inside. This fear transformed public perception of bathhouses almost overnight. Places that had once been centers of health and socialization were suddenly recast as death traps. The warm, steamy, communal air of a bathhouse was now seen as the perfect breeding ground for miasma. and the act of sitting in hot water was viewed as a dangerous form of self-exposure. Municipal authorities, desperate to curb the spread of the plague, began to shutter public bathhouses. In London, for instance, the city authorities closed down the bankside stews along the Thames, blaming the close contact and corrupt air for spreading the sickness. This was not a uniform, continent-wide edict, but a gradual, city-by-city response driven by sheer terror. The private baths of the nobility did not disappear entirely, but they became less frequent, more hurried, and infused with a new sense of anxiety. The therapeutic steam bath, once a prescription for balance, was now seen as a potential death sentence, a stark reversal of centuries of medical practice. At the very same time, a long simmering undercurrent of religious suspicion towards bathing boiled over into outright condemnation. While the Church had historically supported cleanliness for spiritual purity, a more austere and fearful strand of Christian thought began to gain prominence in the late Middle Ages. Preachers and moralists, particularly in Northern Europe, started to loudly associate bathhouses with sin, vice, and illicit sexuality. The communal nature of many bathhouses, where men and women might bathe in close proximity or even together, became a focal point for their ire. They argued that these spaces encouraged lust, vanity, and a dangerous preoccupation with the flesh. Illustrated pamphlets and fiery sermons depicted bathhouses not as places of health, but as dens of iniquity, where the pursuit of bodily pleasure led directly to the corruption of the soul. This moral panic provided a powerful justification for closing them down, allowing civic and religious authorities to frame a public health measure as a righteous act of moral cleansing. The combination of the plague panic and the religious crackdown created a perfect storm that fundamentally altered European hygiene for centuries. Public bathhouses, which had been a common feature of medieval towns, went into a steep decline across much of the continent. They became associated with disease and sin in the popular imagination, a connection so powerful that it persisted long after the Black Death had receded. This did not mean that people stopped washing altogether. The nobility still performed basic ablutions with basins of water, and the use of perfumes and linen shifts to maintain a clean appearance became even more important. But the culture of regular, immersive bathing, the social ritual of the shared tub, and the medical endorsement of the warm soak largely vanished from everyday life. The elaborate infrastructure of castle bathing, with its dedicated servants and portable tubs, began to seem like a relic of a bygone, more decadent age. The fear of water had taken root, setting the stage for the notoriously pungent early modern period, and proving that the standards of cleanliness are not a straight line of progress, but a story of cultural ebb and flow, deeply vulnerable to the tides of disease and dogma. To truly appreciate how all these elements from plumbing to labor came together in a real-world setting, let's travel to one of England's most iconic and well-preserved fortresses, Leeds Castle in Kent. Often called the loveliest castle in the world, its romantic moats and sprawling gardens might suggest a focus on beauty over utility, but beneath that graceful exterior lies a fascinating story of medieval practicality, especially when it comes to bathing. While many castles offer only fragments of evidence, Leeds provides a remarkably clear picture thanks to both its surviving architecture and meticulous historical records. The castle's primary water source was its greatest natural advantage, a series of natural springs that fed the vast artificial lakes and moats surrounding the structure. This wasn't just for defense. It provided a ready and replenishing supply of fresh water, Servants would draw from these sources, but the castle also had its own deep well within the inner courtyard, ensuring a protected supply even during a potential siege. This dual system, the abundant surface water for general use and the fortified well for essential needs, meant that the household of Leeds Castle rarely faced the water shortages that could plague other, less fortunate fortresses. The journey of that water, from its source to a steaming bath, was a masterclass in medieval logistical planning, and the heart of that operation was the kitchen's strategic placement. At Leeds, the main kitchen was situated in the cellar of the Gloriette, the magnificent residential tower that housed the royal apartments. This was a deliberate and brilliant piece of design. By locating the kitchens directly beneath the living quarters of the nobility, architects drastically reduced the distance servants had to carry scalding pots of water. Imagine a servant in that cellar kitchen, filling a heavy copper kettle from a tap connected to a rainwater cistern or a pipe from the well. They would heat it over one of the massive hearths, and then begin the climb, not up 5 flights of a winding turret stair, but just 1 or 2 shorter flights to reach the private chambers of the queen or the visiting king. This saved an immense amount of time and labor, making the prospect of a hot bath far less of an epic production and more of a manageable routine. The proximity of heat and water to the point of use at Leeds represents a significant evolution in castle comfort, a move towards convenience that we can still see etched in its stone layout. Now, who were the most famous bathers in these efficient chambers? The historical record shines a particularly bright light on the castle's royal residents, most notably King Edward I and his queen, Eleanor of Castile. Edward was a formidable warrior king, but his household accounts reveal a man who also valued domestic comfort and hygiene. We have entries from his time at Leeds that detail payments for the construction of special bathing tubs, for large quantities of soap, and for vast amounts of fragrant herbs like lavender and sage to be used in the royal apartments. His wife, Eleanor, was known for her refined tastes, and it is easy to picture her enjoying the relative ease with which a bath could be drawn in the Gloriette, the steam rising in a chamber warmed by a fireplace, the scent of imported rose petals filling the air. These weren't just occasional indulgences. They were calculated acts of royal life. For a king like Edward, maintaining a clean and healthy court was essential for both the prestige of the monarchy and the practicalities of governance, as a sickly court could not effectively administer the realm. Beyond the general royal household, Leeds Castle holds a unique connection to bathing through one of its most celebrated later residents, Queen Catherine de Valois, the widow of King Henry V. In the 15th century, she made significant renovations to the castle, and records indicate she took a personal interest in the private chambers, likely updating the bathing facilities to suit her French tastes. Catherine would have been accustomed to a higher standard of personal grooming than many of her English counterparts. The French court, with its closer ties to Mediterranean and Islamic bathing cultures, was often more advanced in its hygiene practices. It is a compelling thought that the Queen's own preferences may have directly influenced the bathing rituals at Leeds, perhaps introducing more frequent bathing or more luxurious scents and oils to the routine. This personal touch reminds us that castles were not static museums but evolving homes, where the habits and desires of their inhabitants directly shaped the daily rhythms of life, right down to the warmth of the bathwater. So, what physical evidence remains today? While the original wooden tubs have long since decayed, the architecture itself tells the story. Visitors to Leeds Castle can still see the impressive kitchen fireplaces in the Gloriette's cellar, their soot-blackened hearths a silent testament to the countless cauldrons of water that were heated there. More intriguingly, within the queen's private suite, you can find the distinctive garderobe or privy chambers. These small rooms often doubled as the most private spaces for washing. Adjacent to one of these garderobes, you can see the remnants of a small stone basin and a lead drain pipe set into the wall, a clear indication of a built-in washing area. This wasn't a full immersion tub, but a permanent fixture for daily ablutions, a place for the queen to wash her hands, face, and feet, a crucial part of maintaining cleanliness between full baths. This physical evidence, combined with the financial records, creates a powerful, tangible link to the past. It allows us to stand in the very spot where a medieval queen performed her daily toilette, connecting us across the centuries to the intimate, human reality of life within these storied walls. Yet for all their ingenuity, the sophisticated bathing culture of the medieval castle did not simply vanish into the historical record. Instead, its core principles went dormant, waiting to re-emerge and evolve into the familiar comforts of our modern bathrooms. The line connecting that wooden tub in a drafty chamber to your own enclosed, tiled sanctuary is not a straight one, but a winding path of rediscovery, technological innovation, and a slow, centuries-long shift in attitude. The fundamental human desires that drove the medieval noble to seek out a warm, herb-infused soak, the need for cleanliness, the pursuit of relaxation, and the connection between physical and mental well-being never truly went away. They were merely suppressed, forced to find expression in more limited ways during an era dominated by the fear of water. The basin and washcloth, the use of perfumed linens and strong scents to mask body odor, these became the stopgaps that maintained a bare minimum of personal presentation, while the deep, immersive cleanse became a distant memory for many. The Great Reawakening began, as so many cultural shifts did, during the Renaissance. As European thinkers rediscovered the classical texts of Greece and Rome, they also rediscovered the classical value placed on personal hygiene and public health. The humanist focus on the beauty and potential of the human body naturally led to a renewed interest in its care. Wealthy merchants and aristocrats, inspired by the art and literature depicting Roman bathhouses, began to view bathing not as a perilous undertaking, but as a civilized, almost philosophical activity. This was not an instant return to the medieval model, however. The initial steps were cautious, often taking the form of more elaborate versions of the portable tub, now crafted from finer woods, and sometimes even lined with ceramic tiles for easier cleaning. These were placed in dedicated rooms, the first hesitant steps toward the concept of a private bathroom. The medieval lord's bathtub, once a piece of mobile furniture, was beginning to put down roots, signaling a slow return to the idea that a space could be permanently reserved for the act of bathing. The real transformation, however, was driven by a revolution in infrastructure that would have left a medieval water-bearer in awe: the rise of modern plumbing. For centuries, the greatest limitation on bathing was the sheer, back-breaking labor required to move water. The invention of pressurized water systems in the 18th and 19th centuries changed everything. Cast iron pipes, steam-powered pumps, and eventually municipal waterworks did what an army of servants could not. They delivered hot and cold water directly into the home at the turn of a tap. This technological leap dissolved the primary economic and physical barrier to frequent bathing. The enclosed bathroom, as a dedicated, plumbed room, became a reality first for the wealthy and then, gradually, for the middle class. The fixed tub, once a rare luxury of carved stone, was reborn in mass-produced cast iron, coated in gleaming porcelain enamel. The medieval garderobe, with its simple drain, evolved into the flush toilet, completing the chamber's function, and finally separating the acts of washing and waste removal in a way that medieval castles, for all their sophistication, never fully achieved. Our modern bathing rituals are, in essence, a high-tech echo of those developed in the medieval castle, refined and democratized for a new age. The scented soaps and bath oils we use today are the direct descendants of the lavender and rose petals steeped in a noblewoman's tub, now produced on an industrial scale, but serving the same purpose of engaging the senses and promoting relaxation. The concept of the bath as a therapeutic retreat, a place to soak away aches and pains, is a direct inheritance from the medieval belief in the healing power of warm water, now supported by modern science rather than humoral theory. Even our social media trends of self-care baths, complete with bath bombs and calming music, mirror the medieval understanding of the bath as a sanctioned space for mental and physical restoration. The steam rising from your bathtub today carries the same promise of renewal that it did in a castle chamber 700 years ago, a timeless human pursuit of comfort and cleanliness, finally liberated from the burden of manual labor. This evolution from a labor-intensive luxury for the few to a commonplace convenience for the many represents one of the quietest but most profound revolutions in daily life. The medieval castle's bathing culture, with all its complexity and inequality, was a crucial link in a chain that stretches back to the Roman thermae and forward to our own bathrooms. It preserved the knowledge and the desire for holistic cleanliness through a period often mischaracterized as universally dirty. The story of bathing is not one of linear progress from filth to cleanliness, but rather a cycle of embrace, rejection, and rediscovery. The next time you step into your shower or sink into a warm bath, remember the invisible history flowing from the tap, the centuries of innovation, the forgotten labor of countless servants, and the enduring human impulse to create a moment of peace, warmth, and cleanliness, a luxury that has been refined across the ages from a monumental logistical feat into a simple daily grace. So, the next time your mind wanders to a medieval castle, let the image shift beyond the grand feasts and clattering armor. Envision instead the quiet, determined effort happening just beyond the great hall. Picture the steam rising from a wooden tub in a private chamber, carrying the calming scent of lavender and rosemary. Hear the rhythmic footsteps of servants on stone stairs, forming a human chain to transport the heavy, sloshing buckets that made such comfort possible. This was not a world resigned to filth, but one that performed a daily miracle of logistics to achieve a sophisticated standard of cleanliness. The story of medieval bathing is a powerful reminder that our assumptions about the past are often built on myths, and that the human drive for comfort, health, and dignity is a timeless force, capable of creating moments of warmth and refinement even within the cold, imposing walls of a fortress. It connects us to the people of that era not as crude caricatures, but as inventive, resourceful individuals who understood the profound value of feeling clean and refreshed. Thanks for joining this journey into the surprisingly hygienic heart of the medieval world. We'd love to hear what surprised you most. So share your thoughts on medieval hygiene in the comments below.